You will manifest all you desire just by listening tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight is not ordinary, and what you are about to hear is not random, rehearsed, or accidental. There are moments in life when time itself seems to pause, not because the world stops moving, but because something within us becomes still enough to receive. This is one of those moments. You did not arrive here by chance. You were drawn here, summoned by an inner knowing that said, "Listen carefully, this matters." Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a world that constantly teaches us to do more, try harder, push further, and chase what feels just out of reach. We are told that fulfillment is earned only through struggle, that manifestation requires endless effort, and that peace must be fought for. Yet deep within every human heart is a quiet truth that contradicts all of this, a truth that has been whispered through generations, spoken by the wise, and rediscovered by those who dared to listen rather than strive. Tonight, we are not here to add another burden to your shoulders. We are not here to give you techniques to exhaust you, rules to overwhelm you, or instructions to pressure you. Tonight is about something far simpler, yet infinitely more powerful. Tonight is about listening, not listening as a passive act, but listening as a doorway, listening as a spiritual alignment, listening as the moment where resistance ends and transformation begins. Ladies and gentlemen, history has shown us that the greatest shifts in consciousness did not begin with action, but with awareness. Before every breakthrough, there was a moment of recognition. Before every visible change, there was an invisible acceptance. And acceptance always begins with hearing. When the mind is quiet enough to listen, truth has room to enter. And when truth enters, it does not knock politely. It rearranges everything. Many of you come here carrying desires you have held for a long time. Some are unspoken, some feel delayed, some may even feel impossible. You have prayed, hoped, waited, and wondered if your moment would ever come. But what if the moment is not something you're waiting for? What if the moment is something waiting for you, waiting for your attention, your openness, your willingness to receive? Ladies and gentlemen, tonight is not about forcing belief. It is about allowing recognition. The subconscious mind, the creative center of your life, does not respond to pressure, but it responds instantly to acceptance. And acceptance happens most effortlessly when you listen without defense, without judgment, without the need to control the outcome. As this message unfolds, you are invited to do only one thing: be present. Let the words reach you beyond logic, beyond effort, beyond fear. You do not need to analyze them. You do not need to fight them. You only need to allow them, because sometimes all it takes to change everything is to truly listen. Listening is not passive. It is not a background activity. It is not something you do while waiting for something else to happen. Listening, true listening, is an act of assumption. And assumption is the birthplace of every manifestation that has ever entered this world. When you listen deeply, you are silently agreeing. You are saying without words, "This is possible for me." And the moment that agreement is formed within, reality begins its quiet adjustment. Most people underestimate listening because they confuse it with hearing. Hearing is physical, listening is spiritual. Hearing uses the ears, listening uses consciousness. Assumption is not pretending, it is not forcing yourself to believe something you do not accept. Assumption is the natural state you fall into when resistance dissolves, and resistance dissolves fastest when the mind is no longer arguing. Listening suspends the argument. Think about it. When you listen, you are not talking back. You are not correcting. You are not defending old beliefs. You are open. And openness is the most creative state a human can enter. The subconscious mind accepts information in moments of receptivity. It does not need evidence. It does not need logic. It only needs exposure while the conscious mind is relaxed. Listening creates that relaxation. The body settles, the mind softens, the guard comes down, and what enters during that moment becomes instruction. That is why a single conversation can change the direction of a life. That is why one sentence heard at the right time can dissolve years of doubt. It is not the sentence itself, it is the state of listening that allowed the sentence to be received. When you listen to truth, you are not gathering information, you are accepting an identity, you are silently deciding who you are willing to be. And identity always precedes manifestation. Most people try to manifest from effort, They speak affirmations while internally arguing with them. They visualize while doubting the outcome. They repeat words while feeling disconnected from their meaning. That is not assumption, that is negotiation. And the subconscious does not negotiate. It only reflects what is assumed as natural. Listening bypasses that conflict when you listen without resistance. The message does not feel foreign. It begins to feel familiar. And familiarity is powerful. The subconscious accepts what feels familiar as normal, and what is normal must appear. Assumption is simply choosing what feels normal within you. Listening allows a new normal to be introduced gently, without force. It slips past the inner critic. It enters through ease. That is why listening can change you faster than years of trying. You are not manifesting because you are repeating words. You are manifesting because something inside you has stopped objecting. Listening is the moment objection ends. When you truly listen, you stop asking, "Is this true?" and start allowing, "What if it is?" And that shift alone is enough to open the door. The subconscious responds to "what if" far more powerfully than to prove it. This is why faith often begins as curiosity, not certainty. Listening places you in a receptive identity. You are no longer the one chasing results. You are the one allowing truth to impress itself upon you. And the subconscious, once impressed, will externalize that impression automatically. You do not need to supervise it. You do not need to remind it. You do not need to hurry it. The seed grows because growth is its nature. Assumption does not feel dramatic. It feels quiet. It feels like a subtle internal nod, a sense of this fits. And that feeling often comes while listening, not while striving. That is why listening is so underestimated. In listening, you temporarily release control. And control is often the very thing blocking manifestation. Control is rooted in fear. Listening is rooted in trust. And trust is alignment. When you listen, you are telling the subconscious, "I am safe to receive," and safety is essential. The subconscious will not accept what feels threatening. It will not accept what feels contradictory to identity, but it will accept what feels gentle, natural, and resonant. Listening creates resonance. That resonance is assumption forming. Assumption is not about words, it is about state. And listening shifts your state. It slows you down. It draws attention inward. It softens emotional rigidity. It invites alignment rather than effort. You may not feel anything dramatic while listening. That does not mean nothing is happening. In fact, the deeper the work, the quieter it often feels. The subconscious prefers subtlety. It prefers calm. It prefers repetition in relaxed states. Listening is repetition without resistance. Each time you listen, the idea becomes less foreign. Each time you listen, the possibility feels more reasonable. Each time you listen, the subconscious relaxes into acceptance. And acceptance is assumption fully formed. Once something is assumed, reality must reorganize to confirm it. Not immediately always, not predictably always, but inevitably. Reality has no choice. The outer world is a mirror, not a decision maker. It reflects what is internally normalized. Listening normalizes as new truths. You're not trying to convince yourself, you are allowing yourself to be impressed. That distinction matters. Convincing is effortful, impression is effortless, listening is impression. That is why transformation can happen simply by listening. When listening is done without internal debate, without multitasking, without emotional armor, just presence. The moment you listen fully, you step into a creative role. You are no longer a consumer of information. You are a receiver of instruction. And instruction accepted by the subconscious becomes lived experience. Assumption is not magic, it is law. What is accepted as real within must appear as real without. Listening is how acceptance begins, not by force, not by pressure, not by willpower, but by openness. And openness is the doorway through which all things enter. The subconscious mind does not reason, negotiate, or argue. It does not analyze circumstances or question timelines. It does not weigh probability or ask whether something is deserved. The subconscious mind obeys, and it obeys whatever it accepts as true. This is a law that operates whether you are aware of it or not. Every belief you currently live with about money, love, health, opportunity, and yourself was not chosen through logic. It was absorbed, heard, repeated, impressed during moments when your conscious guard was lowered. And once impressed, it became command. That is why effort alone cannot change reality. You cannot force the subconscious with conscious will. You can only impress it. And impression happens most easily through repetition in relaxed states, through hearing rather than striving. The subconscious does not care if a message is positive or negative. It does not evaluate morality. It does not ask whether something is empowering or limiting. It simply asks one question: is this familiar enough to be accepted? Familiarity is authority to the subconscious. That is why people repeat patterns they consciously dislike. That is why someone can desire abundance yet feel comfortable with struggle. The subconscious is loyal to what it knows, not to what you wish. And this is where listening becomes transformative. When you listen in a calm, open state, the conscious mind loosens its grip. The internal commentary quiets. The need to correct, doubt, or resist fades. In that moment, what you hear bypasses the conscious filter and enters directly into the subconscious. Once there, it begins to operate as instruction. This is not metaphor, this is mechanism. Words heard repeatedly in receptive states do not remain words, they become assumptions. And assumptions become behaviors, expectations, and outcomes. The subconscious does not wait for evidence, it creates evidence. That is why your inner dialogue is always externalized. That is why the tone of your thoughts eventually becomes the tone of your life. The subconscious simply obeys the strongest, most familiar input. Listening strengthens input. When you listen to something again and again, the subconscious begins to accept it not as information, but as environment. And the subconscious is shaped by environment. You were conditioned by what you heard growing up, by the conversations around you, by the emotional tone of voices, by repeated statements about what was possible and what was not. None of that required your consent. It read only exposure. Now understand this clearly. The same mechanism that conditioned limitation can condition liberation. The subconscious does not discriminate between past and present. It responds only to repetition and emotional neutrality. When something is heard without resistance, it is accepted. That is why the state in which you listen matters more than the words themselves. You could hear the most powerful truth in the world, but if you are tense, defensive, or mentally arguing, the subconscious remains closed. But when you listen while relaxed, when the body is calm and the mind is not fighting, the gate opens, and what enters through that gate becomes law. The subconscious mind is obedient, not intelligent. It does not test reality. It enacts it. It does not question commands. It executes them. That is why fear-based thoughts manifest so quickly. Fear is repetitive and emotionally charged. It is heard internally again and again. The subconscious accepts it as instruction and produces outcomes to match. The same obedience applies to empowerment. When you repeatedly hear that you are supported, chosen, capable, and aligned, and you hear it without internal contradiction, the subconscious begins to move reality to confirm it, not symbolically. Literally, it alters perception. It influences decisions, it guides behavior, it arranges encounters, it attracts confirmation, not because you are trying, but because it is obeying. Listening is how you install new instructions. You do not need to overpower old beliefs. You only need to stop reinforcing them and begin reinforcing new ones in receptive states. The subconscious cannot hold two opposing commands with equal intensity. The one repeated most calmly and consistently wins. That is why listening can be more effective than affirmation. Affirmation often triggers resistance. Listening invites acceptance. When you speak affirmations, the conscious mind often interrupts. That's not true. That hasn't happened. That's unrealistic. But when you listen, the mind is less likely to interrupt. It is receiving, not performing. Receiving is safer to the subconscious than performing. And safety is everything. The subconscious only accepts what feels safe. And safety is created by calm repetition. That is why nighttime relaxation and stillness are powerful. That is why hearing truth in quiet moments is transformative. The subconscious obeys tone more than content. A calm voice carries authority. A relaxed state invites compliance. This is why listening tonight matters. You are not being asked to believe blindly. You are not being asked to force conviction. You are being asked to allow familiarity to form. Familiarity creates belief. Belief creates obedience. And obedience creates manifestation. Once the subconscious accepts an idea, it no longer asks if, it asks how. And even that question is not conscious, it is operational, it moves silently. You may not notice the shift immediately. The subconscious works beneath awareness. It rearranges perception first. You begin to notice different opportunities. You interpret events differently. You respond rather than react. These are signs of obedience in action. The outer world follows because the inner command has changed. You do not manifest by demanding outcomes. You manifest by issuing internal instructions. Listening is how those instructions are delivered. You are not here to wrestle with your mind. You are here to speak to the part of you that listens without argument. That part exists. It has always existed. It has been listening your entire life. Now it is simply receiving something new. And once received, it will obey automatically, naturally, faithfully, because that is its nature. Faith is not effort, it is not strain, it is not convincing yourself of something that feels far away or unrealistic. Faith is reception. It is the quiet willingness to let something be true without trying to force it into existence. Most people misunderstand faith because they confuse it with intensity. They believe faith must feel dramatic, emotional, or powerful. They think faith requires mental pressure, constant repetition, or unwavering certainty. But real faith is gentle. Real faith is relaxed. Real faith feels natural, almost ordinary. Faith does not shout. Faith listens. The moment you begin to strain, you are no longer in faith. You are in effort. And effort always implies lack. Effort says, I do not yet have. Faith says, I am allowing. Reception is the highest form of belief. You receive what you believe, and you believe what you allow yourself to receive. That is why faith cannot be forced. The harder you try to believe, the more resistance you create. Belief is not something you push into the mind, it is something the mind settles into when it feels safe. Faith happens when the mind stops trying to control outcomes and starts permitting truth. This is why listening is so closely tied to faith. Listening places you in a receiving posture. You are no longer projecting desires outward. You are opening inward. You are no longer asking, how will this happen? You are simply allowing the idea to exist within you. And once an idea is allowed to exist without resistance, it begins to feel familiar. Familiarity creates acceptance. Acceptance creates faith. Faith is not certainty about the future, it is comfort with the present assumption. You do not need to know when or how something will manifest to be in faith. You only need to be at peace with the idea that it is done within you. Peace is the evidence of faith. Rest is the proof. If you are restless, you are still trying. If you are anxious, you are still negotiating. If you are tense, you are still forcing. But when you are at ease, faith has taken root. Reception feels like relief. It feels like a quiet yes inside. It feels like no longer chasing answers. It feels like no longer needing signs. It feels like permission to stop struggling. Faith does not ask for confirmation, it becomes confirmation. This is why those who manifest effortlessly often appear unconcerned. They are not detached because they do not care, they are detached because they have received internally. They are no longer seeking externally what has already been accepted inwardly. Reception completes the desire. Desire exists to be received, not chased. The moment you receive the idea of fulfillment, the desire dissolves into knowing, and knowing is faith. Faith is not imagination running wild, it is imagination settling down. When imagination is restless, it jumps from possibility to doubt. When imagination is received, it becomes stable, and stability is creative. The subconscious responds to stability, not excitement. It responds to calm assumption, not emotional highs. That is why faith often feels boring to the ego. There is no drama in certainty, there is no urgency in knowing. Faith does not rush. The ego wants movement. Faith wants alignment. Reception aligns you with what you desire by making it internally present. You stop thinking of it as something coming and start experiencing it as something known. The shift is subtle, but everything changes there. The moment you say internally, this is allowed, faith is born. allowed to exist, allowed to be mine, allowed to unfold. Faith is permission, and permission is powerful. You do not need permission from the world. You need permission from yourself. The subconscious will not produce what you do not permit yourself to receive. It will not manifest what you secretly believe is too much, too good, or too unlikely. Reception removes those barriers. When you receive an idea fully, you no longer feel the need to justify it. You no longer argue for it. You no longer defend it. You simply live from it. That is faith. Faith is not repeating "I believe" while doubting. Faith is resting in "I know" without explanation, and knowing often arrives quietly while listening. Listening invites faith because it removes performance. You are not trying to be spiritual. You are not trying to manifest. You are not trying to impress the subconscious. You are simply present. Presence is the doorway to faith. In presence, the mind stops running ahead. It stops replaying the past. It stops calculating outcomes. And in that stillness, truth can be received. Truth does not need to be dramatic to be powerful. It only needs to be accepted. When, why? Oh, you receive truth, it integrates. When it integrates, it becomes identity. And identity creates reality. Faith is not hoping you will become someone. Faith is recognizing who you already are. Reception is the recognition of alignment. You do not receive what you fight for. You receive what you relax into. That is why surrender is misunderstood. Surrender is not giving up. It is giving in to alignment. It is letting go of resistance, not desire. It is trusting that what is impressed within must express without. Faith does not require vigilance. It requires trust. Trust is not watching closely. It is releasing control. When you trust, you stop checking whether it is working. You stop measuring progress. You stop comparing timelines. Those behaviors signal doubt to the subconscious. They tell it the instruction is incomplete. Reception completes the instruction. Once something is received, there is nothing left to do but allow it to unfold. And unfolding is natural. You do not pull a seed out of the ground to see if it is growing. You trust the process because you understand the law. Faith is understanding the law of consciousness and resting in it. What you receive internally must appear externally. Not because you hope, not because you try, but because reality obeys consciousness. Faith is not blind, it is lawful. And reception is the moment the law is activated. When you receive an idea as true, the subconscious begins to rearrange everything necessary to make it visible. It does not ask for your help. It does not require your supervision. It simply moves. Your role is to remain receptive, not reactive. Faith remains calm because it knows reaction interferes. It knows doubt interrupts. It knows force distorts. Reception keeps the channel clear. That is why listening is enough. Listening invites reception. Reception births faith, and faith completes the work. You do not manifest by effort. You manifest by allowance, and allowance is faith in action. There are moments that are ordinary and there are moments that are appointed. An appointed moment is not loud. It does not announce itself with signs and symbols. It arrives quietly, disguised as a simple opportunity to listen, to pause, to receive. Yet within that moment is the power to alter the trajectory of a life. Tonight is not just another night, it is a window. A window in consciousness opens when readiness meets timing. You cannot force it open and you cannot hold it open forever. It appears when the inner world is prepared to receive something new. And when it appears, what you accept in that window becomes accelerated. This is why some realizations take years, while others take minutes. It is not the information that differs, it is the timing. Timing is not about clocks, it is about alignment. When you are aligned, truth lands deeper. It does not skim the surface of the mind. It settles into the core of identity. And when identity shifts, everything downstream changes. Tonight represents alignment, not because of where you are physically, but because of where you are internally. Something in you softened enough to listen. Something in you grew tired of forcing. Something in you became willing to receive rather than chase. That willingness is what opens the window. Many people hear the same words their entire lives and never change. Others hear them once at the right moment and are never the same again. The difference is not intelligence, effort, or worthiness. The difference is readiness. Readiness is quiet. Readiness does not announce itself, it simply recognizes resonance when it appears. It feels like a subtle pull, a sense of familiarity, a feeling of this is for me. If you are listening now, you are in that state. An appointed moment does not demand action. It invites acceptance. It does not require movement, it requires presence. It asks only that you not resist what is being offered. Resistance closes the window, acceptance keeps it open. That is why urgency is unnecessary, panic is unnecessary, strain is unnecessary. The window does not respond to pressure, it responds to receptivity. When a moment is appointed, the subconscious is unusually open. The old filters are relaxed, the defenses are lowered, the identity is flexible. This is when impressions go deeper and last longer. This is why nighttime, stillness, and quiet attention are powerful. They create the conditions for appointed moments to be recognized and utilized. Tonight carries that quality. What you accept now does not stay confined to this moment. It ripples forward. It reorganizes assumptions. It influences decisions you have not yet made. It shapes conversations you have not yet had, all because something was received during a window. An appointed moment is not about doing something dramatic. It is about allowing something decisive. A small internal yes at the right time can change everything. Most people miss their windows because they are busy trying to control outcomes. They are focused on how, when, and why. They are looking ahead instead of being present. And presence is where windows appear. The moment you stop asking, will this work? And start allowing, what if this is true? The window opens wider. This is not coincidence. Consciousness moves in cycles. There are periods of preparation and periods of reception. Preparation often feels like struggle, confusion, or delay. Reception feels like relief, clarity, and ease. If you are in a receiving moment, forcing action will only disrupt it. Stillness is the correct response. An appointed moment asks for trust. Trust not in effort, but in law. The law is simple. What is accepted in consciousness must be expressed in experience. But acceptance is easiest when resistance is low, and resistance is lowest during appointed moments. Tonight is not about making something happen, it is about allowing something to be installed. Installed beliefs operate automatically. They do not need maintenance, they do not need reinforcement through force, they simply run. That is why what you accept in an appointed moment is powerful. It becomes background truth. It becomes part of your internal environment. From that point on, life adjusts around it. You do not need to tell anyone what you accepted tonight. You do not need to prove it. You do not need to defend it. The seed does not announce itself before it grows. What matters is not what you do after this moment, but what you allow during it. An appointed moment is not loud, it is gentle. It does not feel like a breakthrough. It feels like a settling. That settling is alignment. Alignment feels like things making sense without explanation. It feels like no longer needing reassurance. It feels like a quiet confidence without evidence. These are signs that the window is active, and once a window closes, the work continues invisibly. The subconscious begins to rearrange perception, expectation, and response. Reality begins to echo what was accepted. You may notice changes slowly or suddenly. Both are valid. The speed does not matter. The acceptance does. What you accept tonight becomes tomorrow's normal. This is why distraction is the enemy of appointed moments. Distraction pulls attention outward when it needs to be inward. It fills the mind with noise when it needs space. Stillness honors the moment. The simplest way to honor an appointed moment is to stay present, not to analyze, not to judge, not to rush ahead, just to allow. Allow the idea that things can be easier. Allow the idea that timing is working for you. Allow the idea that this moment matters, because it does. You do not need to mark it. You do not need to dramatize it. You do not need to remember it perfectly. The subconscious remembers what matters, And when a window opens, it records what enters. Tonight is not about effort, it is about entry. Entry of a new assumption, entry of a new normal, entry of a new trajectory. Appointed moments do not repeat themselves often, not because they are rare, but because readiness fluctuates. When readiness and timing align, the moment appears. You are here because they aligned, and what you allow now will quietly but inevitably change what comes next, because a window once used reshapes the path beyond it. You do not manifest because you are trying to become something. You manifest because you already are. Creation does not begin in the future, it begins in identity. And identity is not something you build, it is something you recognize. Everything you desire is responding to who you are being, not to what you are doing. This is where most people struggle. They believe manifestation is about effort, repetition, or discipline. They believe they must align themselves toward a future version of themselves. But the truth is simpler and far more confronting. Reality is always reflecting your current state of being. You do not attract what you want, you attract what you assume yourself to be. The world does not wait for you to become worthy, it mirrors what you are already accepting as true about yourself. And this happens automatically without negotiation. That is why chasing outcomes never works. Chasing implies separation. It assumes you are not yet the one who has. And reality obeys that assumption faithfully. Being is the command. When you understand this, manifestation stops feeling like work and starts feeling like recognition. You realize you are not here to create something new, but to remove the illusion that it is missing. Desire is not evidence of lack. Desire is evidence of identity trying to express itself. You desire abundance because abundance already exists as a potential state within you. You desire love because love is already part of your nature. You desire freedom because freedom is already your inheritance. You would not desire what you were not capable of embodying. The mistake is believing embodiment comes later. Embodiment comes first. Reality follows identity, not the other way around. The moment you internally accept yourself as the one who already is, already chosen, already aligned, ready supported, life begins to rearrange itself to confirm that acceptance. Not because you forced it, but because reality has no other option. You are not manifesting events, you are manifesting confirmation. Confirmation of what you already assume yourself to be. This is why listening works so powerfully. Listening shifts identity quietly. It introduces a new sense of self without confrontation. You do not argue with identity, you settle into it. When you listen deeply, you begin to feel like the one who receives. And the moment you feel like the one who receives, receiving becomes normal. Normal is powerful. The subconscious does not ask what you deserve, it asks what feels normal. And it will organize your entire life to preserve normality. If struggle feels normal, you will experience struggle even while desiring ease. If delay feels normal, you will experience delay even while hoping for speed. If lack feels normal, you will experience lack even while affirming abundance. Change normal and reality changes automatically. But normal does not change through effort, it changes through acceptance. Acceptance of being. Being is not pretending, it is not lying to yourself. It is allowing a deeper truth to surface, a truth that was always there but buried under conditioning, fear, and repetition of limitation. You were conditioned into identities that were never yours. You heard things long enough that they began to feel true. But feeling true does not make something real, it only makes it familiar. Now you are learning that familiarity can be rewritten. Listening introduces a new familiarity, a new sense of this fits. A new internal posture that says, "This is who I am." And the moment that happens, manifestation is no longer a process, it is a consequence. You do not wake up each day to make your heart beat, it beats because it is your nature. In the same way, your reality responds because it is its nature to reflect consciousness. You are not commanding the universe, you are expressing yourself through it. That is why forcing outcomes creates resistance. Force implies separation between you and what you desire. But when you recognize that what you desire is an extension of who you are, force disappears. You stop trying to get. You start allowing expression. Being feels calm. Being feels grounded. Being does not need urgency. Urgency is a sign you believe something is missing. Being knows nothing is missing. This is why true manifestation feels boring to the ego. There is no drama in alignment. There is no adrenaline in certainty. There is no chase in knowing. You simply are. And from that state, action becomes effortless. Decisions become clear. Opportunities appear without strain. People respond differently to you, not because they changed, but because you did. Identity shifts perception. Perception shifts interaction. Interaction shifts outcome. All without force. When you accept that you already are, you stop waiting for permission. You stop asking for signs. You stop checking whether it is working. Those behaviors belong to someone who is still becoming. Being does not check. Being knows. Knowing is quiet. Knowing does not need reassurance. This does not mean you deny your current circumstances. It means you stop letting them define you. Circumstances are echoes, not causes. They are reflections of past assumptions, not indicators of future possibility. You do not consult the mirror to decide who you are. You decide who you are, and the mirror eventually reflects it. Reality is the mirror. You are the source. When you listen and allow yourself to feel like the one who already is, you stop identifying with struggle narratives. You stop rehearsing old stories. You stop reinforcing outdated identities. You are not abandoning responsibility. You are assuming authorship. Authorship means recognizing that consciousness leads and experience follows. This is not arrogance, it is alignment. You are not claiming superiority, you are claiming truth. The truth is that you have always been the operant power. You were just taught to forget. Now you are remembering. Remembering feels like relief. It feels like coming home. It feels like no longer trying to earn what was never withheld. Manifestation flows naturally from that state, not because you demand it, not because you deserve it, but because it matches who you are being. You do not manifest what you want. You manifest what you accept as yourself. And tonight, through listening, through openness, through stillness, you are accepting a deeper identity. One that does not strive, one that does not chase, one that does not beg the future, one that simply is, and reality will respond accordingly.